So she got on the announcements and she said, "It is raining out. There will be an indoor recess." And that's a terrible English accent, I know. But a student stood up in this third grade class and said, "Wait, I'm going to turn that into a compound sentence." And then in his English accent, "It is raining out, comma, so we will have an indoor recess." So when things like that happen, you know that it's sticking. You know that that snowball is accumulating.
Rainbow Sky Creations acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on, the Dharawal and Whadjuk Noongar people. We pay our respects to their elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultures.
Hello. Welcome back to Rainbow Skies for Teachers. We have got another interview for you today. So it's just going to be me, Ashley, and our guest, Patty McGee. Now, you may have seen the title of this episode and you think, a whole episode about grammar? Is that going to be for me? But I'm here to say, yes, it is. Patty is a wealth of knowledge. But not only that, she is really trying to change and shape the way that we teach grammar in the classroom. So if you automatically think grammar, boring, then this episode is for you, because Patty shares with us loads of different ideas that we can use in our own classrooms so it doesn't get that boring response in your head. So let's get into it, because Patty can explain grammar and all of our mindset shifts around it way better than I can. Hello, Patty. Can we just start off our conversation by talking about why grammar can feel so overwhelming for teachers?
Yes. Where do I start? I think that one of the biggest challenges, at least in my anecdotal research that I've done talking to lots and lots of educators, is they don't feel comfortable with grammar. They don't feel like they know it. And that's almost like a secret that they've been keeping, that they don't want others to know that they don't know grammar very well. And there are so many people that feel that way. And so grammar, if you don't like it, you don't want to teach it. And the same practices that were used for the teachers when they were students are the same practices that are available to them now. There are some small pockets of places where they're really getting to be innovative, but the vast majority of schools, classrooms, teachers are still with the worksheet, fill in the blank, identification, and correction like crazy. And with all of that having been the way that we were taught and not having another way, there really is just a standstill almost when it comes to grammar instruction.
I think I agree with that there is a real standstill with it, because I've been a teacher for 20 years now, almost 20 years, and I feel like nothing has really changed in that area. And sometimes it gets a bit more of a spotlight and sometimes it doesn't, but that's kind of as far as it goes.
Yeah, it's almost like grammar is optional, yet it is. Around me and everywhere I've been as a consultant, the number one complaint of all teachers, not just teachers of literacy, but all teachers, are just like, how come they're not punctuating? How come they're not capitalizing? So it's the most understandably complained about topic, but the most undertaught as well.
Interesting. So what would you say to a teacher who says like, oh, look, I'm bad at teaching grammar? Because I think there's so many teachers out there like that. Like I even said something to you at the beginning of this before we jumped on, and I was like, oh my God, that wasn't grammatically correct.
Yeah, there's a fear. Let's layer this up. Number one, we feel uncomfortable that we don't know grammar very well. And then we look around at the culture around us, whether it's school culture or society, because we're teachers, we're expected to know grammar really well. So we don't want to expose ourselves. And then there's also people walking around with T-shirts that say, I'm silently correcting your grammar, which is creepy. And then
like threatening in a way.
Yes. And then, mugs that say grammar police. And in some classrooms, I've seen full-on posters of fatal flaws. Like these are the things that they're in your writing. They're considered a fatal flaw. So it's just layer upon layer, year after year, this just nugget of shame, I think, is like the source of it all. And the lack of engaging materials. both of those things are really preventing some good things from happening.
Okay, so I want to talk about some engaging materials. I'm going to go off a script a little bit, but what are some ways that we can make grammar fun in the classroom? And here at Rainbow Sky, we're all about hands-on activities, especially in maths, and making learners experience learning in a way that's super fun, that it doesn't really feel like a chore.
Yeah. So let me kind of back into that question with a little history. So as a classroom teacher myself, I really was very good eventually at literacy instruction. And it was because I went and studied it. I just read books, and I'm very close to New York City. And so I got to go to a lot of workshops and just learn all about reading, writing. And I did that because I was a really good reader and an okay writer. So therefore, I didn't know how to teach it. I just, when you're not struggling with something, you're not sure how you work through the same struggles that the kids are working through. So I had to go and really dig deep. And my literacy instruction became stronger and stronger, except for grammar. Grammar was just a black hole. That was an obligatory black hole in my teaching. And I thought, there's got to be a better way. For the past couple of decades, I've been thinking about this. And sometimes when I have a problem with practice, I look outside of schools and see what we do in the world. When we learn something naturally, because we're curious about it, there are many things we engage with intentionally. And those might be, I love to refinish furniture with Annie Sloan chalk paints and waxes. It's really fun and it's kind of artistic. And so that was the thing I have been learning about for about a decade. And I started off with just seeing it and playing with it a little bit and hypothesizing what combination of paints and waxes might look good on this shelf. And then I would go to an expert and they would explicitly show me what I needed to do to get that look. And then I would play and practice some more because I wasn't about to touch that piece of furniture until I got those techniques down. And then I would try it out and reflect on that and think, well, first, let me get some feedback on this. And second, what do I feel like I know? And now what am I curious about? And so all of those experiences are missing from traditional grammar instruction. We're not asked to get curious. We're not asked to hypothesize. We're not asked to seek out feedback or reflect or experiment and play. And when I started to realize that, I started to create things. And these became entry points for learning grammar. I want to say the outcomes of it have been fascinating to watch.
So what sort of activities? Can you give us some examples of what teachers could, listening to this today, they'd be like, oh, I could give that a go in my classroom?
Yes. So first and foremost, I believe starting in second grade, it would be different for K and 1, that we are best starting at the sentence level and studying sentences, the types of sentences in comparison to other types of sentences. So simple sentences and compound sentences. And the first thing I would do with simple and compound sentences is basically identify for them, give them a list of simple sentences and a list of compound sentences. I already told them which are which, and partner kids up and ask them to make their best guess, to theorize what is the same and different about them, what is their relationship. So we're starting off with curiosity and a bit of a brain teaser, like they won't know for sure. And then the next day or a couple days later, I like to then explicitly teach. I like to teach what makes a sentence a simple sentence and how to take two simple sentences and combine them to make a compound sentence. And I literally do it in giving them steps. So it's take one sentence, change the period to a comma, pick a conjunction, which the nickname for these conjunctions I did not make up, fanboys, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Pick a conjunction that works, and then put your second simple sentence after that. And takes just a couple minutes. I ask kids to give it a try. I'll already have a couple sentences prepared for them to out loud make some compound sentences. And then here comes my favorite part. And I think it might be yours too, with what you were saying about math. So I have created, and others have created, like second graders have created, grammar manipulatives, so that we are using, for example, word cards cards where I have a collection, an envelope full of all different parts of speech, endings, all different punctuation. And we might ask kids to, after that particular lesson, after we've taught explicitly, the next time we have some grammar time, we'll take out our word cards and we'll start to build compound sentences with partners or within a trio. So we're talking about grammar. We're using what is standard grammar. We're not expected to jump right into, well, we just did simple and compound sentences for 2 days. You must be perfect at it. Off you go. There's lots of play, like 2 days maybe of different hands-on grammar usage. And then we pause and reflect. I just did this the other day in a 4th grade classroom. And I just asked, what do you know now about compound sentences? And what are you curious about? And they would say things like, oh, now I know fanboys. Oh, I know I need to put a comma before the fanboys. And then inevitably there's somebody, this happened the other day, but it happens so often. Can you put 3 simple sentences together? And I'm like, as a matter of fact, you can, but that's really for 12-year-olds. But if you want to learn it, I can teach it to you. It's something called a compound complex sentence. And so do you see how just natural curiosity bubbles up in kids? And we don't need to know everything there is to know about grammar to be able to do that with them. In fact, it's better if we've almost forgotten almost all of it. Because as we're teaching them, that beginner's mindset really can make such a difference in not answering the question. Yeah. It's quick. Also, it's a 10-minute. I don't even call them lessons. I call them just experiences because, lessons usually have some type of structure to them. But this is exposure to grammar and doing so across time so that these experiences start to snowball and accumulate grammar know-how.
So they're like little mini snippets, I guess, throughout the day and the week. There's 2 things that stood out to me when you were explaining that activity. And I think these are 2 things that we can often get wrong as teachers. Number one, you spoke loads about speaking and listening as one of the main components. But number 2, there was actually no sitting down and writing involved. And that's one thing that as teachers, yes, we might have some things that we feel overwhelmed about. We feel like we're not great at grammar. But as kids, they don't love sitting down and writing either.
Yes.
So you've been able to incorporate that without actually having them sit down. You're taking away some of that resistance, which I really, really love. Yes, there comes a time for writing, and it might be them getting out a mini whiteboard or having a go in their books. But none of what you said required them to go and sit down in silence and write. And I really love that.
Yes, I do too. We know the conversation is just so important. And also, scaffolding is important, especially when it's something new. So if kids went straight to writing after my explicit teaching lesson, the cognitive load just to get something down on the page between choosing the words, making sure the words are a simple sentence, choosing more words to make another simple sentence, spelling the best that we can, sometimes even shaping the letters. Sometimes just the focus to make that happen, all of that, and build a compound sentence on top of it, that's just a very heavy cognitive load. So if we lessen the load a little bit and really allow kids to zoom in on what we're showing them and what we want them to play with and making sure it feels like play, not a game. Because games, there's a winner and a loser. And that makes for not such a good feeling around grammar, which is already there. So we don't need to fuel it anymore. But play is when we don't know the outcome, whatever is going to be created. And I can tell you that in workshops that I've given to teachers and other educators, there's a moment where I pass out a manipulative. I ask them to just do with it, the reason that I gave it to them. And there's so much laughter that's happening. I was presenting to about 100 people, and I just stopped them. And I said, let's just turn around. You're going to have more time with these manipulatives. But when was the last time you laughed when you were learning grammar? So that there's a little bit of delight to this. There's curiosity, there's inquiry, there's answers, there's feedback, there's play, and then that time to reflect.
There's creativity as well.
Sure is. Yeah.
Yeah, Patty, I think you're really opening my mind, but our listeners as well, into how we can incorporate grammar, it not be like overwhelming and not be like a big, hard thing to do. You talk a lot about the system being broken, the teaching system, not necessarily the teacher. Can you talk a little bit more to that?
Yes. So if we're talking about grammar specifically, the system has been to almost bequeath the same practices from one generation to the next. And let's just imagine if that was the same idea with cars. We'd still be in a Model T right now. We would not be able to go to the places we go. And instructional practices evolve in that same way. And just think that's part of the system, is not rethinking and reimagining. How can this be better? We have boatloads of research about how people learn. And yet we have sometimes very antiquated practices that do not align with what we know to be true.
We also, teachers, they fall back on the only thing that they know, which is one of the reasons why we love having this podcast and we love connecting with people like you, Patty. Like, I'm in Sydney. You're over in the US. We would never have met normally, but you're sharing your wonderful ideas with me, and we're empowering thousands of teachers that are listening to this podcast each week. And the more we know, the better we can do. And teachers, it's not your fault. You're just given the curriculum, you're told to go and teach it, and you do the very best that you can. But that's why I love being able to connect with other teachers and learn and listen to how other people do it, which might be a better way.
Yep, 100%. And I want to say that is how this book of mine and this approach came about. I have a co-author. He knows more than anybody I know about grammar, and he brings that to the table. And I brought instructional practices that I either discovered by watching teachers or watching kids. One of my favorite manipulatives came from a second grade class. So I had a workshop going on, and I like to demo in classrooms. And I was demoing a couple of the lessons or experiences that I was just sharing with you because they're about 10 minutes. So did them all together, but would have separated them if it wasn't a demo. About an hour later, there's a knock at the door, and it's two second graders holding a piece of paper that's folded in half. And they're both holding onto one side of it and walking together because they both want to own it.
Yeah,
I know, right? And they came in and said, we wanted to show you what we made. They made compound sentence kits. So in this little piece of paper that was stapled like a hamburger, in there were directions and Unifix cubes. And they took blue Unifix cubes to represent the simple sentence. So it started with a blue Unifix cube, a white for the comma, a green for the fanboys, the conjunction, and then blue for the simple sentence and black for the punctuation. And so it had directions in there. You want to write a compound sentence? Here's how you do it first. And then it's like, and here's the diagram. And then you put this Unifix cube on there. It was just so brilliant.
Yeah.
So it's just something where you just don't know how amazing it is and can be. And so, like I said, so much learning from the teachers that I've had the pure honor of working with, and from the kids that have taught me so much about what they really need when they're learning.
Absolutely. So my next question was going to be about mindset shifts. And I think that one of the mindset shifts is to learn to take the lead a little bit from your students, because I'm listening to that story and I'm like, okay, now they could actually come up, show the class, and that could be one of your rotational activities in your reading groups the following week. Like, why not? That is an activity that they've come up with. They're teaching each other. There's so much goodness in there. But what are some other mindset shifts that teachers might need to make in order for grammar to feel empowering instead of exhausting?
Yeah, there's a few things. First mindset shift is grammar is not a set of linear rules. Grammar is to a writer as a paintbrush is to a painter. It's how we make meaning on the page, how we choose to craft our voice. And when we learn things about grammatical concepts, that makes us stronger at making meaning on the page. And so we can't go from worksheet to writing. It's so much deeper than that. We can't expect to remember everything about grammar for our students and for ourselves. It's something that there are grammarians in the world, and I'm thankful for them. I don't know if down under you all read The Giver by Lois Lowry, but there is a character in there who holds all the memories of this community, and he then gives pieces of them over to a younger character, Jonah. And that's what I feel like grammarians are. They are the giver and the giver. And at the same time, another mindset shift is that grammar is ever evolving. 16th century grammar, where I can read a quote to you. It was a 16th century philosopher saying that all the world's problems could be solved with grammar. So this is not a new problem right now. But the way he wrote was very different, obviously. And it's because, and this is another mindset shift, I would say grammar falls into 3 buckets. The first is spoken grammar. My spoken grammar here in the US is different than much of the spoken grammar in Australia. And that is because that's our community. Those are the sorts of things that we say. It's influenced by the people around us and the people that came before us. That spoken grammar influences book grammar, how authors choose to use or misuse grammar for effect and meaning. And then finally, there's standard grammar, which are essentially the grammar standards that a country, a state, a province would say, these are the standards that we want our students to know. And it ebbs and flows, and the rules are ever changing. And sometimes it's very frustrating to watch, but it can also be a relief. Like, oh, I don't really have to remember that because that wasn't the way when I was a kid. Now I get it. Or the way that we see book grammar influencing sometimes spoken grammar, or spoken grammar influencing book grammar. And I always say that when it comes to grammar, it's really nice to learn it precisely and in depth, because that's just like Picasso, who was a fine artist before he went all Picasso on us. So we and our students as budding writers, evolving writers, to know that we have these tools of grammar in our back pocket. One more mind shift would be not starting at the parts of speech level, starting at the sentence level. And eventually, by the time kids are, say, 14 or 15, we want them to have 4 types of sentences under their belt that they can pull out from their back pockets. And those are simple, compound, complex, and then the ever elusive, this is hyphenated, compound complex sentences. When we're fluent in using sentence structure, we can always revise it. But when we're fluent with a structure, it helps us be able to get at least the first draft down a little bit easier. And so starting at the sentence level, because it's the building blocks of writing and it is the containers of all parts of speech, that really studying sentences and expanding them and combining them and in creating them.
My kids' school implemented something new 3 years ago. I don't know if they still do it or not, but I'd be interested in your perspective on it. It was a sentence of the day. So the whole school across the school did a sentence of the day. I don't know. I wasn't in the classroom, but I am assuming that they would break down that sentence depending on what grade they were at and what they were learning. Is that a good strategy, or is that a boring strategy? Be as honest as you like. I'm not going to be judgmental of your answer. I'm really interested to know.
So that's called a number of things. Like, it's sentence mimicry. So if we're going to write a sentence that uses the same patterns and structure as that sentence, I think that that is actually something very fun and playful. And if it's correcting the sentence, it doesn't have the same effect, because seeing errors and fixing errors has been proven to not be effective. It's also, over here, it's called mentor sentences. There's a lot of work that comes from Jeff Anderson and Whitney LaRocca on different types of sentences that we study for a little while, and we learn how they're constructed, and then we mimic that construction and choose when we're going to use those types of sentences in our writing. I think it's a good approach. I think having one way of being exposed, one entry point for grammar, is not enough. Going back to my painting furniture, if I was just mimicking, that would only be partially learning for me. I need to get curious.
So sentence of the day, we could do that a couple of days a week. We could do some of the playful games a couple of days a week and just keep it as those mini snippets.
Yes, or even a sentence, instead of a sentence for the day, it could be a sentence for 5 days.
Yes.
Especially if there's, a day off or something, that we're taking that same sentence, we're looking at it, then we're breaking it apart. And then me as the teacher, I'm going to write my own sentence that looks just like that one. And then students talk to each other and I give them a topic. You're going to be writing about ducklings. And so write a sentence about ducklings that fits the same frame. Write it out loud and I'll be listening in. And I'm going to write one down that fits the same structure. Okay, next day. Now we're going to use the same structure, mentor sentence. Again, you and your partner come up with something, but this time write it down and then share it with other partners just to compare to make sure it looks like the same structure. So like teasing it out a little bit and having just one, but going deep with it is something that I would recommend.
Also a lot easier for a teacher.
Yes.
Because you're only thinking one sentence for the week instead of a different one every single day.
Yes. And can I just also say that there are so many things that we do as teachers that we can extract from our lives. Like there are some things we have no choice, but let's just say, and maybe it's not the same way by you, but by me, teachers feel the need to have a set of slides for every single subject every day. And so they're spending all these hours creating slide decks that may or may not align with where this lesson goes. We don't, maybe one slide? Do we need, what is necessary? So you just said that's so much easier for the teacher too. When we look for things that are not ways out, but ways of simplifying, we can see learning take off. And that's another kind of characteristic of our approach of grammar study is that we have a notebook, we have something to write with, we have a partner, or we're in a trio. I might project something, we have scissors, and we have some printouts so we can use the manipulatives. That's it. No bling. It cuts right to the chase so the kids can do the learning.
Absolutely. There's nothing wrong with an old-fashioned whiteboard either. You write the sentence up. You don't need to have the fancy slides all the time. And sometimes we do need to cut habits like that.
Yeah. Yeah. There's almost a guilt when that happens, but it's important.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So if a teacher listening to this only changed one thing about how they teach grammar tomorrow, what do you think would have the biggest impact on their workload, but also student outcomes in writing?
Oh, there's a few, but I think the first...
You can give us a few.
Okay. I think the first thing is remembering that grammar is the paintbrush for writers. And I'm not even sure if that comes number one on the list, but that's important. Also, that we don't have to know everything about grammar. We're not the keepers of all grammar knowledge to just bequeath to our students. We don't need to do that. And also that it takes time, a lot of time. And I'm not talking a lot of time in one day, a lot of time over days, over years for kids to really be able to harness the power of grammar in their writing.
Okay, well, that might answer my next question. But one of the biggest frustrations I had, especially as I started to teach grade 3, grade 4, is that your students know what these grammar rules are. If you ask them what a verb is, they can tell you. They can tell you what a simple sentence is. They can verbally tell you what a complex sentence is, but then they just don't use it in their writing, or they just don't use capital letters and full stops or what have you. What can we do to fix that?
Yes. Well, first, we want to think about writing, and I didn't come up with this, but I really love this metaphor. Writing is like being a conductor of an orchestra. And we need to know how to play each and every instrument. And we need to know what instrument is playing what, when, how, so that it can all come together. And that's not realistic. I mean, I have written 3 books that did not just go boom, boom.
Yeah.
And there were times where I messed things up. Also, I really like to have a 3-minute edit every day on any piece of writing so that kids are keeping that editing muscle strong. All it is setting the timer and saying, we are going to edit to make sure we have capital letters and punctuation for 3 minutes. Go. And we don't need to teach it. And even if they don't get everything right, they're practicing that. When it comes to parts of speech, if they're identifying it, that's actually a very low level TOK, depths of knowledge experience. Not to say it's not hard. It can be very hard, especially because many parts of speech are other parts of speech. I mean, when you think about how many nouns can also act as verbs, there's so many. We might just want to use that as an assessment. Tell me how much you know about verbs. Show me what you know about verbs. Okay, now we're going to study verbs and nouns together for agreement and see how they function together. So having a single grammatical concept in isolation without a buddy actually makes it harder to learn.
Okay, that all makes perfect sense. And I think the grade 3-4 teachers out there are like, yes, they're nodding their heads. Tell me, in a real classroom, so we're talking now, but we're not in front of students, what would meaningful grammar actually look like? Like, we're thinking limited time, which we kind of already touched upon because you're saying we don't need to dedicate a large amount of time to this. It's kind of part of the routine, just short little snippets. But what about diverse learners? What about behaviours that you might have in a classroom? So a teacher's trying to manage all of these things and then include this grammar into your routine.
Yes. Well, that word routine, I think, is very helpful for diverse learners. So knowing that it's this type of day and we're going to be spending this much time, a very short amount of time, doing something with partners. So they're actively talking. They could even be standing up at a desk doing it. They can be, I'm just thinking of executive functioning right now. But we can put some mods in there that are going to help make this more engaging. But what it already is built-in curiosity and engagement. So I actually see some, not all, but I see some difficulties with kids who have attention challenges, and both my kids do, so I've lived this. Be much more engaged because they're literally touching things. They're talking to each other. They're making decisions together. It's something so collaborative that's very helpful. Also, diverse learners in the sense of, say, English learners and using this, I always turn to the WIDA can-do descriptors. Those are so helpful. And if they are early English language learners, we definitely put them in a trio. So they could be hearing and seeing what native speakers are doing. And then they'll also be getting some English instruction, hopefully, on the side as well. I find that second language learners, if they had school, that they actually learn grammar better and faster than native speaking English speakers because they have another language to compare it to. So it's always been, let's say, a Spanish, French, Italian teacher. Like, this job is so hard because they don't know their own English grammar. Only when I was learning Spanish did I start to understand English grammar better. It's that comparison. It's that trans-linguistic transfer.
Yeah, I can relate to that. I learned French for a couple of years. I really tried. But learning how the sentences were set up, even though different to English, it really made me consider how we do it in English. It's actually a really great experience for any teacher. The reason why I took up French is I wanted to do something outside of school, but it was a really great way. I was teaching kindergarten at the time, and it was a really great way to experience not knowing anything and how daunting it can be when you're starting at the very beginning, just like my kindy kids. And I felt like I could really relate to where they were at in their learning. Patty, we're up to my favourite part of the interview because I've got some quick fire, rapid questions for you. And I'm actually really looking forward to hearing some of the answers. Okay, so we've got 4. Number 1. One grammar practice teachers can stop doing immediately.
Identification on worksheets.
Yes, so saying this is the verb, this is the noun. Fabulous. Great. Scrape that off your to-do list, teachers.
Yes.
One sign you might see as a teacher that grammar instruction that you're doing is actually working.
When students start to bring it into other settings. May I give an example?
Yes, please.
So In a school up the road from me here, there used to be a front office secretary. She just retired. She was from England and she had the most beautiful English accent, which this is relevant to the story. They would have her do the announcements, especially the disappointing announcements, because it always sounded nicer coming from someone with an English accent. So she got on the announcements and she said, "It is raining out. There will be an indoor recess." And that's a terrible English accent, I know. But a student stood up in this third grade class and said, "Wait, I'm going to turn that into a compound sentence." And then in his English accent, "It is raining out, comma, so we will have an indoor recess." So when things like that happen, you know that it's sticking. You know that that snowball is accumulating.
I love that. I'm glad you shared it, and I'm glad you used your English accent too.
Thank you.
Okay, number 3. One thing teachers should give themselves permission to let go of when it comes to grammar.
Feeling like they need to know grammar perfectly. Let go of it. Nobody has it. We wrote our book. Tim is the most grammatically sound person, knowledgeable person I know. He reread our book, basically copy edited it. Can't even tell you how many copy edits we had after that. So there's really no end. You can't hold all of that.
Were you nervous writing it with having like a grammar policeman in inverted commas as your partner?
I wasn't nervous because I had to let it go, because if I'm asking teachers to let that go too, I actually still use him as a grammar hotline. I used to call him Grammar Yoda, but Yoda doesn't speak grammatically correctly. So I call him Grammar Hotline. I just texted him the other day, "Is this actually a grammatically sound sentence?" Because it started with the word and I don't know, it was just all of a sudden like, am I forgetting everything I know? So you just don't need to know everything. It's not necessary.
Yeah, wonderful. That really falls into that mindset piece that we were talking about earlier. The last one is not really grammar related. What's your favorite thing to teach, unless it's grammar?
Oh, right now it is grammar, because it's just, and let me explain. I was in a 7th grade class and I was demoing these experiences and I was telling the kids that I've been working on a new approach to grammar. And then when we were all done and I was walking out, a 7th grade boy stood up and said, "That's so much better than the old way."
Oh,
so
love that.
Yeah. But then if I had to choose a close second, it's writing. Gathering student voice onto a page. Delicious.
Which one leads into the other, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
True.
You have shared so much with us today, and your love for grammar and helping teachers really comes through in your voice, which is amazing, because I think that teachers need that. They need cheerleaders in their corner. We have not mentioned the name of your book the entire episode, but you need to share it with us.
Okay. It's called Not Your Granny's Grammar, an innovative approach to meaningful and engaging grammar instruction. And just a little behind the scenes, as I was over the years trying to find other things that would be alternatives to the traditional approach, somebody said to me, "Well, how would you describe this?" And I'm like, well, it's just not what your grandmas and grandpas had as their instruction. It's just not your granny's grammar. And then I was like, I think I like that.
That's a book name. And that is, as soon as I heard the name of your book, I was like, she is our gal. She's our vibe. I love it. So where can they purchase your book if they want to purchase it, or where can they connect with you if they want to get into your world after this interview?
Yes. So the Corwin website, or Sage, I'm not sure how much representation there is in Australia or if anybody's listening from anywhere else in the world, but Corwin, Corwin, and their parent company, Sage. But you can also just go straight to my website, which is pattymcgee.org. But make sure you spell Patty with a Y, not an I, because you'll get a famous skateboarder from the 1960s. And I don't do that.
There we go.
Patty.
Patty. We'll put the link to that in the show notes. There's a lot of listeners that listen from the US and then all Europe. We have got listeners in Africa as well. And how weird is this? Our website the other day, we had one hit from Antarctica. We're not really sure how that happened. We think there was like some sort of
penguin
wire. Yeah, so like, I'm not sure anyone's like running schools down there in Antarctica, but
Yeah.
But we've got listeners from all over the world, so I'll make sure that that is linked in the show notes and everything else related to you, Patty, so people can find you. Thank you so much for joining us. It has been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
See? I told you that it wasn't going to be all boring grammar the whole way through that episode. Patty had so much to share, and a lot of the things are things that we know as teachers. We know that speaking and listening is important before our students start writing. We know that hands-on activities are great for our students. We know that working in pairs or triads is great for our students, especially when we're talking about English and talking about grammar and how to set up sentences and practicing that verbally. But sometimes it's really great just to hear it again and to remind us that this is how we can do it in our classrooms. Grammar does not have to be a worksheet. And as Patty said, that's one of the things that we can throw out. We can throw out identifying parts of speech on a worksheet. We no longer need to do that to have good grammar instruction. Thank you so much to Patty for joining us. We love having different guests on this podcast to broaden our minds, but also to think about things a little bit differently. And you're listening to this podcast, and we know that you are one of those teachers out there that is willing to learn and to think differently and to do the best for your students. So thank you for that, because we need awesome teachers in our classrooms, no matter where you are in the world. As always, we will be back next Monday. But until then, we want you to remember, there are rainbows ahead, my friend, and together we're unstoppable.
Thanks for choosing to listen to Rainbow Skies for Teachers, the go-to show dedicated to teachers who want to make a big difference in education.
If you enjoyed the episode, please leave us a 5-star review or share the episode with a friend, because together we're
unstoppable.